Hello, everybody. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer, and that must mean it's time for another episode of Warhammer Weekly. Joining me, as always, it's my own little festive Nurgling. It's Tom. How you doing, buddy?
Merry Nurglemas, everybody!
Tom is very
You
excited.
get some plague, and you get some plague, and everybody gets plague.
Tom is very happy. I was going to start off this show, Tom, with a joke,
Yep.
So Tom, tell me all the things you don't like about the new Nurgle release, but I knew you were actually excited. So that's, because I was waiting for you to try to put a negative spin on things. But anyway, also joining us is Cody from Venomous Wargaming. How you doing, brother?
Doing just fine, sir. How are you?
I am well. It is good to have you on. If you are not already subbed up to Venomous Wargaming, you should be. We're going to talk about Flesh Eater Courts tonight, which is, of course, one of their main armies you're going to see there. But what I love is you have a lot of different armies covered on your channel and your bat reps that other people might not get to see as often. You have a quite regular Darkling Covens opponent. You just recently put up a vid against some Seraphon, this kind of stuff. And I don't see a lot of battle reports with the Dark Elves, with Lizardmen. It's good stuff.
And those Darkling Coven will surprise you.
They really will.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
I think maybe about 3 weeks ago I did a battle report, and I had a 6-man unit of Crypt Flayers. Mind you, they're 4 wounds apiece. And David, the guy I was playing against, had, I think, a 20-man unit of Executioners.
Uh-huh.
And, yeah, those Flayers went bye-bye very quickly.
Oh, my God. Those Executioners are the devil. Like, they're unexpected. So,
Yeah, I stared down at our final Holy Havoc game. I stared down in a 1,000-point team, like each person at 1,000. Across my half the table, I stared down a block of 30 of those in a 1,000-point game.
It's a lot of Executioners. So yes, I certainly empathize with your struggle there. So if you're not already subbed, down below you will find the link for Venomous Wargaming. Go over, check out his content, give him a sub. It's well worth your time. But we're going to talk about Flesh Eater Courts tonight. Malign portents has dawned. The Age of Hope is dead, and bad stuff is happening.
No. The Age of Hope is death.
Sure.
But hold on. But because of how the language has changed, and we'll talk about this a little bit, I actually think that I'm changing my tune as to what I think what we're going to see in Malign portents.
All right. Well, we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
The point being.
Yep.
Is that in advance of this, where we're going to certainly get some attention on death. We know that because they talk about Nurgle pushing in and assaulting death in the fluff we've seen already thus far. Life assaulting death, as we predicted a while back. So this has been pretty written on the walls. I thought we should cover the most well fleshed out death faction so far. So go ahead, Cody. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was just saying the pun is very strong with that one.
Thank you. You know, it's a good joke when somebody has to say, that's a solid joke you just told there. That's always the sign of great comedy. So the point being is that we're going to deep dive on Flesh Eater Courts tonight, talk about the current sort of largest, most complete death faction, in my opinion, some of their strengths and weaknesses and things like that. But of course, first, oh my goodness, we are going to start with the news. That's what we're going to do.
We got really let down this week.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Because, one thing that we said a couple weeks ago was that, if there's anything for certain no matter how slow the news is, the one constant that we always have
that's true
is the rumor engine image.
Yeah.
And guess what? We didn't get one this week. GW, you're dropping the ball. No, actually they're not. As most of you, unless you've been hiding under a rock or at your in-laws' house, the reality is that we have a huge amount of information and releases this week, as Vince has alluded to. And so we're just going to go in order. How's that sound?
That sounds good. I've got it locked on you, Tom, because I assume you're going to share all the pictures for this stuff.
I am. I'm going to share the pictures badly. Here we go.
By the way, do you mind if I say something here real quick?
Go ahead.
I am prepared to be wildly uncomfortable
for most of the news.
For just ever. Because this is going to be a rough couple months for me. And this guy right away starts me off. I got a thing. I have that I have that syndrome where you can't like this is a real thing. I have that thing where you can't like weirdly placed holes close together make you uncomfortable, you know?
Yep.
So like the squig on this is just a trigger for me. Absolutely. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And
the mushroom brain squig thing.
yeah. So I saw this guy and I was like, well, it has begun. Now this is a beautiful model. Like, don't get me wrong. Like if I can close off that squig, the rest of the model doesn't bother me that much.
And you could realistically like green stuff over that, like file those down and green stuff over it, and then just have a big forehead squig.
I would just get rid of him. Like I would just not like.
Yeah.
Hopefully he's separate on the base because I love the model. I think he's
I doubt
great.
he is, but sure. Yep.
Sure.
Yeah. So this dude, the epitome of Moon Clan.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just love everything that's going on here. This mushroom is growing some goblin.
That's pretty true.
So thoughts, Vince, other than your uncomfortability?
I mean, this model makes me very uncomfortable. Cody, what do you think about it?
Well, I find it kind of ironic that they unleash this guy and show like, hey, look at this brand new destruction model, and then I think a day or two later, all the Nurgle releases are popping up. So it's like, yeah, there's definitely some fungus growing all over. So I mean, at least it's got that going for himself.
He was very thematically appropriate. I agree.
He was.
I mean, it's a great model. I think the only thing I don't like about it, to be completely honest, is the metal nose, because it's such a weird. Yeah, just because aesthetically it's such a chunk of a different material in the middle of what would otherwise be a very expressive face.
It is. It's bad. I think it's balanced by the side though. Like I think visually at a different angle. I think this is a bad angle for the photo.
It could
like if you rotate this like another 15 to 20 degrees.
Yeah.
Where you get the curve of both in the photo. Like I think it would be a great shot.
You could be right. They have this penchant, as we've discussed, before, for really like photographing the models, especially like these kind of models at just the weirdest angles, that often aren't the best.
If you could see both the curve of the nose beard, and the scythe, the moon sickle, I really think that it could be it would be eye grabbing.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I had him, I'd probably cut off his nose and put on a regular goblin nose. But hey, that's just me. There you go.
I love it. I love it. Makes him look like the bad moon. Like his actual face. His face looks like the bad moon. Fantastic. So this guy dropped. And then I wake up.
And we should say this is the herald. The herald for destruction. Yes.
For the blind portents.
And the great part there is that everybody was like, "Oh, it'll just be an iron jaw." Blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like I heard that like 100 times, right?
Yeah.
Like it will just be an iron jaw. And then they dropped this and was just like, boom, that's what we think about your call of it'll just be an iron jaw. So I was actually super glad to see this, that like to pull out Moon Clan to show this, like what a bold sculpt and creation. And this was, I think Brother Tom on Twitter is the painter of this, and he did a fantastic job. So
it's fantastic. Like I loved it. Just loved it. It makes me actually really sad. In fact, like I hate to say that, it makes me really sad that I sold all my Moon Clan. It does.
I will love it when the whole moon. It wouldn't matter because if a whole new Moon Clan thing comes out,
and they'll come with a bunch of new sculpts and stuff like that. Like, and it'll be awesome. They'll be awesome. But
you'd want the new stuff anyways if that ever happened. So
yeah, and the new squigs, because like if they do squigs, we're gonna do new ones, and they're gonna be amazing and all that other stuff. Unless they look like those little brain squigs.
Nightmare scenario you've just described.
Yeah, this guy's fantastic. By the way, Vince, I think that this guy has enough metal on his face to qualify in your Iron Jaws army. That's all I'm saying.
Sure, that's a good point.
He's pretty close. Okay. So I wake up Christmas morning. Kids wake me up at 5:40 in the morning, ready to open up presents. I stumble out of bed, glance at my Twitter feed, and lo, what do I see? The first day of Nurglemas. It's here, folks. We've been talking about it since May. Let me just say that. Like we called at the end of May, Nurgle is coming.
Yep.
Blight War was just a taste of it, but all the full putrescence is here. We got a nice teaser video on Christmas morning with the 7 days of Nurgle. And a number of significant models not the least of which the first day of Nurgle was a Nurgling and a Blight Tree, folks. And inevitably the question was raised, what the hell is a Blight Tree? Because this is a new thing. Vince, I know this is making you uncomfortable with all the little circles close by. I know you're not looking at the screen.
I'm not.
It makes me want to leave this up more.
Thanks.
This spawned a bunch of conversation about, like, what is a Blight Tree? Is it a piece of terrain, like the Sylvaneth stuff? I've actually moved away from that. I don't think that it is a piece of terrain, and we'll talk about this.
Well, all right. So hold on. Let's get the theory out. So I want to know, before you say what you think it is, Cody, what do you think it is?
Well, as much as I want to believe, and trust me, I really want to believe that that is a piece of terrain, it could honestly just be like a video-specific, Warhammer-specific kind of generated up item just to have a ha-ha. But I have a feeling that if that is the case, then people are going to be so upset that it's not actually a real usable item in the game that they're going to ask for it. And I do think it'd be cool, but I mean, honestly, I don't know. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of Sylvaneth that use the trees, and I think it's a great idea for the tabletop, and I'd love to see this as terrain, but I don't fully expect it to be terrain. And that's really all I got for it. I think it's beautiful, though. The Nurgling on the side, I mean, Nurgle is very jubial and stuff like that, and, you know, what better to throw on a Blight Tree than a Nurgling?
Well, and just a quick shout out that one of the things they are doing right with this entire release is having fun with these models. The sculptors clearly had a good time, and the heavy use of Nurglings throughout everything we're going to look at is appreciated, because they are the only models in Nurgle that I actually like.
Yeah, and I'll return to a showcase of the Nurglings
sure
at the end. But the reason why, first of all, I think this is a real model.
Okay.
And I think that it is not a terrain piece, and here's why.
Okay.
We actually see it in this landscape from the preview today. And it's right here up against another terrain piece.
Yeah.
We get it in its full glory with, like, the 3 pustule things and the branches up. We can't see the base, but I'm going to say that that's not a terrain piece. I mean, it could be. But I'm guessing that it's, like, as somebody has pointed out, it's probably maybe an artillery piece, like maybe a short range artillery piece.
What if it's something sort of completely different than we would otherwise expect?
Maybe you mean like the Beast Lord, like Herdstone?
No, not necessarily. Well, I mean, maybe, sure, but, like, okay. What I mean by that is just in role and function, it acts completely different than what we've seen. And actually, I think Matthias just said the same thing I said or I was going to go to in the comments. I think he just said this. What if it is a behemoth that acts like a buffing terrain piece, but also crawls and hence is interactable with, right? Yeah. What if it's like imagine this thing moves like 3 inches.
Sure.
Okay. And it has some kind of aura buff / aura attack around it, right? Because, like, I'm guessing those gross spore things are going to explode, right?
Sure.
And so it has some kind of like
range, a 7-inch something, or
a like either a PvAOE, some kind of ranged style attack when you get close to it, and it's just a slow moving thing that kind of creeps forward.
Yep.
And it is like the Herdstone in that it buffs, right? But and or debuffs the enemy, but it also has some mobility. So it's both terrain and a monster / a model, right? So it's kind of like a mix of all those. We haven't really seen the closest thing is, but just real quick, the closest thought, the closest thing would be like the Great Green Idol or whatever, right? Like the big whatever his name is, rock monster out of
the Rogue Idol. I had hoped that it was a terrain piece, like a true terrain piece, that was summonable. Okay. But wasn't like but was like a buffing thing. Does that make sense? Like a Herdstone that was summonable. Maybe you get to, like, you can take a command trait to place one at the beginning of the game or something. I don't know. In Nurgle Allegiance, but something that was like, it was placeable and it was buffing, and maybe it does like a pulsing damage or something, you know, to non-Nurgle units nearby. The other one that I had hoped that it would be neat, although I know they would never do, is it being something where you could like replace current terrain with it.
Oh, like okay.
Yeah.
Remove an existing terrain
Like
piece.
remove a Citadel Woods and replace it with a blight tree or something.
Sure.
I thought that would be a neat concept. Now, it's super highly dependent.
I mean, the trick is I only see one of them in this picture. We've only ever seen one of them at a time. So it doesn't feel like a piece of terrain in the sense of like the woods where you've got multiple trees out there, right?
Now, how awesome would it have been, let me just say, if it had been something where you could place it as its own terrain piece, or imagine that it had like a base just like a Citadel would.
Sure.
Okay. Or you can replace the Citadel wood. So you pull out their trees and you put your blight trees in their place.
No reason that might not be the case, right?
Yeah,
like that would be an easy special rule to write on something.
Yes. And like, how awesome would something like that be?
Sure.
Like, that would have been a really neat, and it would have really played up that the Sylvaneth Nurgle like interplay.
Both are about life in different ways. Yeah. Sure.
Okay. So we saw this blight tree in that first video. We also were given a clear shot or semi-clear shot of the Beast of Nurgle, which we've been teased for a while. They are mapping to the art piece. You can see they have a pretty mono pose, like right arm raised. Like they have different guts, they have different heads, but it looks like all of them just have different right hands raised on all of these. So they look pretty mono pose. I don't know how many we're gonna get. I would expect 3 per box. Maybe 6.
What are they currently when you take them? How many do you get for a selection? One. Okay.
Yeah. 1, and I think they can go up into units of I don't know actually, in fact.
Is that a 60 mil round?
That looks like a 60 mil round, right? Which is why I anticipated something like a
I would say 3. 2 is probably what you're seeing in the box, I bet.
Oh, you think so?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, kind of like a Chaos spawn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
What are Chaos
Like
spawns for $50?
2 per. Don't know off the top of my head. They're 2 for whatever they are. Yeah.
Huh.
But yes, I mean, I think that's right.
The 6, by the way, 6 are max size of the unit, and there are 6 here in this image. So these may come in 6s. Who knows? If they do, it's probably like 100.
Oh, really swinging for the fences there. Yeah. If they go, if they go for the 6.
Yeah. I mean, maybe. I don't know.
You guys better have some new rules.
Yeah, they're pretty bad. I mean, like, whatever. It is what it is. And then the big win, obviously, in that first video were the Blight Kings on Plague Drones. Whoa, did not see this coming.
Well, I mean, you had asked for an expansion of the Rotbringers. You know, you would want to see that.
I did. I said they needed a cav. Like, if you'll remember, they had infantry. I said they needed a cav unit. We talked about this. And this definitely fits that bill. I'm terrified to see what this unit even looks like on the table. Because now you have, like, Blight Kings with a 7-inch movement, or, 7-inch fly movement. They do mortal wounds on the little, like, if they keep the joint profiles. It'll be a real interesting world we live in.
Yeah, I mean, Cody, what do you think about these guys? Were you excited to see this sculpt, the new option for Blight Kings? Were you a fan of the old kit?
Not so much of the old kit, but I do love the thought of basically Blight King / Bloat Drone Cavalry because, I mean, you've already got Khorne, Mortals of Khorne on Cavalry. They're on Juggernauts.
Sure.
And let me tell you, they're very nasty on the table. So I can only imagine what Bloat Drones mounted by Mortals would be like. And, I always found that kind of strange that Khorne had, mortals on their respective gods' mounts. Why didn't anybody else? And I know that was like an older thing way back in the day, and now it's not so much of a thing in the newer kits. So when this popped up in the video, I was like, whoa, if that's a legit thing, that is really cool. And by the detail, and I mean, even the legs fit perfectly around, it does not look like it's not legit. So I fully expect this to be probably a three-man unit kit.
No.
And these will probably fly off the shelves.
I've painted like 20 actual Plague or Blight Kings. These are new bits. Like, I can already look at it and tell you that that's new. Like, that's not kit bash stuff. That's all new stuff.
Yeah, and I expect it much like the old kit, which is known to be a plethora of wonderful bits, right?
Yep.
I'm sure you'll see much of the same thing here. Blight Kings just lend themselves to that. I mean, like, obviously, you've got this arm, that guy holding the dead human out in front of him and stuff, with the little Nurgling flying off the flag or whatever, right?
And by the way, that Nurgle on the Nurgling on the plague drone that we saw previously was this. Well, it was on the base of this.
Yeah. You can just see him down at the bottom of the picture.
Yep.
He's like right down. If you look under in drones uploading, you can see him riding his little fly down there.
Right there.
Yes, right there. Yep.
So, which is adorable.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think you're going to see 3 of these to a kit. I mean, they might do like a 6-pack like they did with the
I doubt it.
The crushers, but I think you'll see these in 3s. I really
these will probably be in 3s, and they're friggin' amazing looking. Like,
yeah, I will tell you those. When I saw this, I felt bad for the bloat drones. I'm like, good lord, how do you get assigned to this duty? You got that, like the plague bearer is always like got to be. He can't be that heavy, right?
Sure.
But then you're like, nope, sorry. Like you're the bloat drone that shows up to work, and you're ready to pick up your plague bearer mount, your plague bearer rider, and the GUO's like, no. Today those guys are riding you, and you're like,
no,
nah, man, nah, that's not. No way. Look at that guy. He's as big as me. That is ridiculous. This is the fat man on a tiny bike syndrome right here for sure. So, but no, I mean, they're great kits. I don't think they'll be as I wonder if that won't get represented because normal blight drones are what, 7-inch fly, right?
Yep.
I really wonder if these guys won't be like 6-inch fly. I really it'd be a great way to represent it in the fluff that like these blight drones are like overburdened.
It would be funny, indeed. Yeah, I'm excited. Like, I'm just thinking if these guys have these guys will probably have both the mortal and demon keywords.
Well, that goes back and forth.
Yeah.
Sometimes that is the case, and sometimes it is not.
Like, do Juggies have the demon keyword?
No. I say that confidently, not being totally sure off the top of my head.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure they do not.
Okay.
It really goes back and forth with the demonic mount thing. It's not universal. I wish it was, because the other example would be Hellstriders, right?
Yeah.
Hellstriders are immortal on a
demon, and those reflect both keywords.
Right. But like it would be great if they did. In general, I'm a fan of getting pretty saucy with those keywords. Like I say, throw them around because no, the Mighty Skull Crushers do not have the demon keyword. Chaos Mortal, Corn, Bloodbound, Mighty Skull Crushers.
Interesting.
I mean, and these guys are already going to have like Mortal likely and Rotbringer.
Well, currently Rotbringer is not a real keyword.
It might be after this.
It might be though. Yeah, that's
because
exactly.
They specifically called it out, right? As
they identify mortal followers as Rotbringers. Yes,
yeah,
in the Codex preview, like they defined it in that sentence. Yes,
they also then talked about how your mortal slaves to darkness, Nurgle people and Clan Pestilence are going to be able to pitch in and help out and benefit from this stuff too.
Yep.
So it's this is truly going to be probably the largest of the cast tomes in what it touches because it sucks up all that Skaven stuff.
Yep.
Right.
Well, let me be very clear about this. I think any Skaven stuff is going to be tangential.
But I agree. I don't think you're going to see a major focus of it.
Oh, I don't even think you're going to see command traits for Skaven leaders. Let me be very clear. I don't think you're going to see that here.
You're probably right. Although I would love it if they did. It'd be great. Be a nice way to.
We still don't know if. Let me say this: we don't know if pestigores are coming. A lot of people seem to think that pestigores are coming, and we've had some hints in the fluff. We'll know in the next probably 3 days of 4 days of Nurglemas releases. But yeah, we'll see.
I mean, I would kind of expect that because they did Zangors, and as much as I would love pestigores and Corngors and Slangors and stuff like that, like you said, if it doesn't happen the next few days, I'm not gonna hold my breath for it any longer because my third Age of Sigmar army is Bray Herds, and I'm working on them. It's just most of them are web store exclusive, so you order too much, all of a sudden it's out of stock, and oh crap, now I gotta wait a month or so. So they're a little hard to start right now.
I imagine. Oh.
So yeah, and I mean, they could always just pull the same thing with Zangor and just put them into Rotbringers if they in fact.
And that's if they do, that's what I think they'll do. Let me be very clear. Okay, we're gonna move on because there's still tons more. So here's a zoomed in, great Unclean one. one of our first real glimpses of this dude, and he is a house. Look at that smile, folks. Look at the smile.
I think there's everybody focuses on so you get a real good image of his size here because you've got,
and that's why I included him. Like,
you got the tree and you've got the plague bearers, right, and the Nurgling pile right beside him, so you get a pretty good idea of how big he is, and he's clearly big, but he's not like overwhelmingly tall, right? Like the bloodthirster is clearly going to tower over this guy because he's doing the whole leapy on fire up in the air thing.
Or even the Lord of Change. All of them are going to be a lot taller than this dude. But you know what I love about this guy?
He's fat and round and on the ground.
That's actually exactly what I love about this dude.
Hey,
people have been complaining about line of sight blockers. Guess what, folks? Great Unclean one. He is a moving mountain.
This guy is definitely a line of sight blocker. Yeah, you could hide anything behind him. My God. Like, you also get a good sense of just how big the beast is, by the way, in this photo. Yeah, because off of his left meat haunch is one of the beasts, and so you can see the beast itself is pretty big too. He's twice the size of a plague bearer, right? So he's about 2.5, 3 inches tall.
It's so good. It's just so good. Okay, we're gonna move on.
While we're talking, go ahead, go to the next picture, because while we're talking, because you're going to have the picture with this, and it's going to comment I was going to make anyways, that he's obviously very inspired by the Forge World model. So yeah, I'm glad you pulled this image with the Forge World. So the Forge World one is the bottom right.
Yes, this is the bottom right. This is the Forge World. I think this is a fan photo. I don't think that this was up on the GW site, but
no, but I mean, Pete retweeted it or whatever.
Yes, so. Pete retweeted this, which is why I felt like it was an appropriate one. So this gives you an idea of the sizes. A bunch of different faces. I love the smile, like the Joker smile, versus some of these weird, ugly faces.
Well, the other one is a face directly copied from the Wayne, the Wayne England art or whatever.
Yes, and I have that art at the end of this. So
sure,
yeah. So let's look at the individual one. So we have the dude with the plague flail, and the great bile sword, which we've seen.
The traditional build, as it were, yes.
The traditional build, exactly. With just fantastically disgusting detail. Here's the art piece, by the way, that inspired that. The original Wayne England piece. And you can see like the skulls and the swords and the flails and all that, and all this maps to what we're seeing. We don't get the weird tongue, but that's because his mouth is closed.
Well, it's on they actually pulled this piece of art apart for both of them. Because the head of the art became the head of the other one, and the weapon kit out of this one became the weapon kit out of the...
Yes, and that's what you're seeing here. Here's the head with the mouth. You can see the weird, oddly shaven mouth with the weird tongue and the head on top of the tongue. You see this one was the Bioblade weapon, and the Doomsday Bell, which, let me just say, that Doomsday Bell is amazing. For those of you that don't know what it does... nearby Nurgle units all gain 3 inches to their base move.
That's scary.
So those plague bearers are moving on 7 base now instead of 4. I'll take it.
It's a big change.
Now imagine that and rolling into the cycle, the Nurgle cycle that adds 3 inch to all Nurgle movement.
Sure.
And those guys could roll out on a 10-inch move at the top of 1. If you rolled into that, which would be just fantastic.
Well, and that's assuming we don't have a way to just set where you start.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Because I have a distinct feeling that there's going to be a way to set where you start.
Agreed.
Right? Like in the battle tome, because it's not gonna my distinct feeling is that will be the case. Right. And so then
you won't roll it'll probably be a command trait where you will select your general, blah blah blah, they are attuned to the cycle.
Yeah.
Or the other one is I think we might get one where you can bend the circle.
So -1 or +1, something like
-1 or +1, or you can hold the cycle for a turn. Like your grip is such that you can get a single bonus for 2 rounds in a row or something.
Sure.
I don't know. We'll see. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of mechanics they play with. There'll be a lot of options, but obviously this is a fantastic sculpt with the awesome new belt.
I mean, what I just want to say real quick, obviously this is horrendously disgusting. But I do want to give full credit to the sculptor here for really doing an amazing job with plastic at making, that's a plastic model. And
Sure.
you know what I mean? Like that's what that is. And you look at it and it's just like it's such a great sculpt of the torn flesh and the flab rolls.
Yeah.
Like those flab rolls really do look soft and squishy and layered on top of each other. It's just, it really is like just amazing sculpting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I mean, a lot of people, we just sort of take for granted that the models blow our minds, but it's the little details, like the roll of the flesh around his elbow or his knee. Like, yeah, just that, look at the way the skin pulls toward the knee. Like, it's such a little detail, but you do like subconsciously, it just really sells this image of like this bloated, you know, creature with all this extra skin just hanging off of it and this fetid grossness. It really is an amazing accomplishment as a sculpt. And if, you know, like you don't have the other one back up, but it's that little thing. If you go back to the Forge World one, it's nothing like that. Okay. Like that's the difference. Like look at that Forge World one. Look at how flat his skin is by comparison. Okay. You see what I mean?
Yep.
Like it has none of the nuance that these new ones do. And to me, it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
So anyway, just something I noticed.
That's a great observation. And then finally, we get Rodagus, the new named character. We didn't get the guy that we were anticipating, which was what was his name? I forget his name. There was another guy that has showed up.
Yeah. The named guy from back in the end times or whatever.
Yes, exactly. He has a neat little hood, which we see on a bunch of other Nurgle models. He's obviously the caster among them. He has a little wizard staff. His Nurgling mimics him as a little wizard Nurgling, which is pretty fantastic. He has the tentacles that we see on Gutrot Spume.
Yep. This is both my favorite paint job, my favorite build of this guy, and the absolute most horrifying of all of them.
Oh, really? The maggots come out of the mouth?
No, that doesn't bother me that much. It's the mouth, it's the holes in his arm, the mouth holes in his arm and belly and left. Like both of his arms have these weird gaping maws in them that are just like, oh boy, like that is unsettling to say the least.
I'll bet it's warm.
This guy's, but like I like the look with the hood. I really do. I think.
Oh yeah,
cool.
It's sharp. Like I'm looking at all this, and I'm like, well, it looks like I'm buying 2 of this kit.
Well, and also this color scheme is great.
Yeah. I like the fleshy. I'm gonna need to think through because like all of my demons were purple, like my plague bearers were purple, and so I need to decide if I want to carry that through on these guys when I do these guys, or how I want to what I want to do with them.
So Cody, what's your favorite one out of the 3? Which one's your sculpt?
Honestly, I would have to say the one Tom put up earlier with the plague flail. I absolutely love like anything fantasy, anything medieval, and obviously Age of Sigmar really touches that on me. But I just love flails. I think they're awesome weapons. I hard to put my finger on why. I just think it's great, and I'd love to see what the flail does. But at the same time, Rodagus really is a very close second for me, just because I love the thought of the hood, the maggots falling out of the mouth. He's gross. If you even look at his left hand as he's holding it outstretched, it's even got like a whole separate head coming out of the bottom, and I think that is so neat. And I even love the little Nurgle plague staff he's got going on up there. I really think they're all great models. And when I woke up the other day, I think around 7 in the morning, I saw this. I was like, wow, this is huge. And normally I'm not too keen on the Nurgle stuff. I'm actually not too keen on Chaos at all, really. And I really have to say that this, though, makes me really, really consider Nurgle finally. But Spencer, another guy I have on my channel that's basically my second in charge for me, he's already like, licking his chops like, oh yeah, that's mine, I call it. I'm like, okay, that's yours.
He planted the flag already on this one, is what you're saying.
Yep, the moment it happened, he was blowing up my phone with all the images saying like, look.
Gotcha.
That's fantastic. For me, I can already tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to get 2 of these kits. I'm going to build one Rodagus, probably pretty stock. And then I'm going to build this dude because that smile is infectious. It just is. And I'll probably keep the plague flail down here because this looks like a different arm right here. Like if you look at these two, I think these two are different arms. Like I think this is an elbow joint as a like this versus this is a hand joint, and you can see that here. Like you can see there's a line here.
Yep.
Right. And so what I'll end up doing is I'll end up building this guy, and I'll magnetize his hand to be either the sword or the bell, and then I'll probably build Rodigus separate.
Boo to magnetization. I say commit.
I know you want me to build 3 of them, and I already have 2 other great unclean ones. I have the Forge World one, and I have a third-party one, so I really don't need to have 5 great unclean ones.
Sure you do. It's never too many.
You're insane. So I'm definitely not going to do that. So, okay. So those are our great unclean ones. Moving on. We have 2 new heralds. The first is Sloppity Bile Piper.
Maybe the greatest model and greatest name in the history of Warhammer. Haters, step aside. Okay? I got a rant prepared for this. Do you mind if I go on this real quick, Tom?
Okay.
Here we go. I've seen some hate circulate on this guy's name, on Sloppity Bile Piper, that name is silly. Silly. The name is silly.
See our comments, for example.
Sure. Let me tell you why I think that is completely wrong. First of all, we are all blessed to live in a wonderful age where disease, the thing that for 200,000 years of human history has claimed the bulk of human lives, that has stolen children from their parents and been the major foe of all of mankind, has been reduced to a joke. That is the age we live in, folks. We won. We beat nature and turned disease from the greatest foe of humanity's continued existence, a thing that wiped out 1/3 of the population in Europe in the last millennium, into a joke that we make funny characters about. And by naming it Sloppity Bile Piper, we have shown just how funny we can be with this horrendous concept. This game is meant to have fun, and I am all about it. God forbid we have a hilariously fun time with our wacky, fun God of Plagues. The guy who's known to be the fun dude, who's bringing gifts, who's the celebration of everything life in the worst way possible. He is this beautiful paradox, and though the models chill me to my core, I love everything about the attitude of it, because otherwise the Chaos Gods could just be so dour and down and awful. But instead, they inspire you to have fun with them. And God bless it. That is the thing I love the most about the Warhammer world, is that infusion of fun and comedy. And it's one guy's name, and I am so glad his name is Sloppity Bile Piper. If you don't like it, call him Herald of Nurgle or anything you want. But I, for one, say yes, please, and more. It is a beautiful turn, a wonderful statement on the current place that humanity has risen to, and a hilarious model that brings fun and humor and joy to the overall game of Warhammer and makes it unique and one of the great, great, great things that has filled all of our lives with joy. That is my rant. Thus endeth the rant.
In a more awkward... Oh, go ahead, Cody.
I actually have seen a lot of the rants too, and yeah, I definitely agree with Vince here. Is like, just lighten up. I think it's great that we can make a joke out of disease, which is, you know, killed at least our world's population over, if not maybe multiple times over. And
sure.
I think it's great that, you know, they really go for the fun. There's my daughter going for the fun with the fun of Nurgle, and you can clearly tell that he's got like what looks like a heart. I mean, I'm not indefinitely sure, but it looks like a heart, and he's just playing it like a bagpipe, and I think that is just hysterical. And you've got the little Nurgling at the bottom that's just like,
a heart? Or
it's the,
I don't know.
It's the, so they did say, first of all, one real quick comment on the comments.
Yeah.
Do not worry, I have not forgotten Chaos Lord Scroopy Noopers. He will and forever be the Chaos Lord of the true champion undivided over Archaea, Scroopy Noopers. But anyways, so I love funny names. They do say what that is in the comments. That is the guts of the last Sloppity Bile Piper. Like when a Sloppity Bile Piper dies in battle, a new Sloppity Bile Piper gets made by Nurgle, and he has to go get the guts of the dead one and use it as bagpipes.
That is incredible.
I was gonna say, what body part is this? That's what I want to know.
Hmm.
Like, is this the torso of the last Sloppity Bile Piper?
It's the internal colon and stuff, so you put together what that part should be.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you've answered that because like this
That
is
poor Nurgling.
This is the spine right here.
It really puts his like open mouth position, which is clearly meant to be singing, into a sort of very unfortunate light.
Oh! That dude, which let me just say, this guy's a hero. And
He is hilarious.
Well,
I love
we'll get to this. And we'll get to the Nurglings. I want to do a showcase of Nurglings at the very end. Okay. Moving on. So we have Spoilpox Scrivener, which this dude is like a set of rumor engine stuff.
He really is.
Just writ in large. Obviously, he has the quill that we've been talking about. We had asked about what this is.
Yeah, and we had said, it's funny, too, because originally we had dismissed this as a Nurgle model.
Well, we said maybe a new Epidemius.
Sure, but I think largely the sort of rumors had coalesced, and I certainly felt that this wasn't a Nurgle model because the quill was so fancy, right? And if you think of the new 40K tally guy, like the Death Guard dude, he's just using like a bone spike that's been dipped in ink, right?
Yeah.
And that's more what I saw as like the standard Nurgle tally keeper.
You didn't see the fun coming, Vince.
I didn't see the fun coming because it's a Tzeentch feather, Nurgle's enemy, of course. Like, yes, of course he stole a feather out of like a Tzeentch Lord of Change, out of his tail, just yoink, and is writing with that. So yeah, I didn't think about that.
That's a hilarious observation, and indeed, that's what has happened. He clearly has an excellent scroll holder right here with his
own guts. Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Absolutely.
I'm pretty sure that this mouth right here is the extension of his trunk.
Yeah. It wraps around. Yes, that is his mouth.
Around. That's his mouth. And then obviously this is some of the best scroll work we've seen right here, I would argue. Like of all the scroll stuff that we've seen in the various model releases.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is my least favorite part of this model.
Is
to be completely honest. Yeah, is the scroll.
Interesting.
And I'll tell you why, because that's actually modeled onto the paper. Some of those pieces are, right?
Like these raised areas are modeled on.
Yeah, and
I don't think the written things are.
No, they're not. But like, I don't like that. I'd rather it just be a blank canvas, so you could just freehand on it. Because here's the problem. That's on the model now. So every scroll has 1, 2, 3 square boxes, and and so on.
The
and
Nurgle
so forth,
symbol up here, and yada yada yada. No, I get that. Yep, I hear that. And then you have the little hungry Nurgling over here, down here, just eating it up.
It's pretty great.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. So, and by the way, they said we have 3 heralds now: the base herald, and then these 2 guys, and each are going to have their own function. I think the base herald's probably going to become a wizard, maybe. I'm guessing. And then this guy sounds like he's going to be a lot more like Epidemius, I'm guessing. Like a tallyman, maybe. I don't know. And then this guy is like a buffer, I think, is what they said.
This guy brings the party. Let's be honest. We all know what's happening here.
He does. He brings the plague that causes dancing and people
laugh themselves to death. Yes.
Yep. We have down here the Maggotkin of Nurgle. So it wasn't the Nurgle, is what we thought it might be. What I had called just because like grandfather Nurgle. Or the grandchildren of Nurgle. I thought they'd play on that, but instead we do get a family language, but just something different. So the Maggotkin. This guy on the cover we think might be the Lord of Blights, who is a named character that is discussed, a named Blight King-esque person, because I can tell you there is no character that maps to this model. That shield does not currently exist. Like that stuff does not currently exist in the Blight King stuff. And we see this guy show up all over the place and talked about as a character.
Interesting.
And they talk about the heads that he has that he hands out. We'll talk about his ability here.
Oh, yeah.
And here are the heads back here. So he gives a ranged attack to nearby Blight Kings. He was like, hey, in the article they said, hey, by the way, we have this. He gives this awesome range support. That's what it was to nearby Blight King units. I don't know if I buy that this is truly range support at a 14-inch 1 attack to a unit of Blight Kings that's probably going to be 5 or maybe 10 models. But that said, I get
Whatever,
it.
man. He gives a shooting attack out. It's a neat, like, this is unexplored design space,
Indeed.
right?
Indeed. It is. And so that's pretty sweet. He gives a range attack to a nearby Blight King unit, which will encourage bigger Blight King units. They did say, by the way, that they have reduced the cost on Blight King units. So there is a points adjustment on Blight King units. And I had previously said that at 180, they're a utility tool. They're not like an anything tool. But man, if they get bumped down to like 160 or like even, heaven forbid, 140, suddenly that becomes a completely different proposition.
Sure.
Like you're in completely different, space if they've been bumped down that drastically.
I feel like they got to be 160.
I think so too. I can't imagine a 140 drop. Like that would just be insane. But hey, you never know. We get a new item, that is going to be picked up by Nurgle followers. It's a once per game, roll 2d6. If you roll a 7, which isn't terrible odds, you just auto kill the nearest enemy model. So
1 in 6 times you do it, you'll kill the nearest model.
Yeah,
it's a 16% chance.
That's not; those aren't bad odds. That's all I'm saying.
Nope.
New spells they said in the book. Here's an example. Which, like, who thought that they would be handing out this type of ability in a spell? On a 6+, the unit inflicts a mortal wound in addition to any other damage.
Sure.
Which is pretty good. Like,
and it's for all hits, so it works, as they mentioned, it works with the shooting attack that's granted, as well as any melee attacks they make. So
right, and let me just point out that those would be exploding attacks if they're on Blight Kings.
Sure, absolutely.
So, like, man, how offensive is that? That not only would their hits explode to D6 hits, but all those would do mortal wounds as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and even just think of bases of Nurglings fighting like that.
No, it's true. Is those Nurgling bases just throw out 5 attacks per unit or per model? Is that right?
Oh yeah. I mean, granted they're a little crappy on their own, but hey, all you need to roll is a 6 up, and that's a mortal wound. And the more attacks, the more chances.
That's right. Yeah. When you're crit fishing, it's about rolling dice.
Yeah, and that's very reminiscent, by the way, of hold on just a minute. Does Morbidex give +1 to hit with
I don't know. It's your guy.
Just dawned on me. I think Morbidex gives +1 to hit for Nurglings nearby.
Oh, Morbidex twice spawn. Yeah. What does he sit under, Robert? Or where is he under?
He sits under Chaos Warriors of Chaos. Hold on, I'm pulling him up right now. It just dawned on me as I was looking at this. That
turning Nurglings into mortal wound machines.
Yes, turning Nurglings into mortal wound machines. Already, my brain is cranking through possibilities with something.
No, it is add 1 to all wound rolls.
No, curses.
Sorry.
That's too bad. I was already trying to break the system. But anyways, so here's some fun. You're right though. 5 attacks per base. You could easily you get 3 bases for 80 points. So it's 15 attacks. You'll average 2 to 3 mortal wounds per round on just 3 bases. So that's not bad for 80 points. Pretty good.
Not bad for chaff that you were going to throw out and was going to die anyways.
Right, but let me point out that also this is on a casting value of 7, so this is not going to go off very often. You have a 50-50 shot of that actually landing.
A little more than, but yes.
Yeah, a little more. Anyways. And then finally, here's, by the way, talking about Rodigus, which is the big named guy, is going to do a bunch of mortal wounds. He's just going to pour out mortal wounds everywhere around him. Both with his streams of brackish filth, and then seemingly also with his spell. Which is just...
I'll tell you the problem with Nurgle spells. They're all going to cast on 7.
I know. I'm very aware.
Yep.
Like, I'm already doing the math when I look across the army. Like, a lot of people are saying that my KO army was, kaput after this, with this Nurgle release, and I don't know that that's the case. I'm really excited about this, don't get me wrong, and I'm going to be buying a bunch of the models, but I think that I will definitely see through my current army project.
Well, what I'll say is that I'm just excited because that means everything Slanesh will cast on a 6, so I'll at least be able to cast 1 in 3 of the spells that I cast, which will be exciting.
Fair enough. And then the final thing I wanted to point out pull up from the Nurgle stuff was I just want to highlight, like, we already saw the rider. We already saw the rider, the little plague drone, mini plague drone Nurgling rider. But I wanted to pop up some of the other smaller dudes. As somebody pointed out on Twitter, you can now make a D&D party out of Nurglings.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. And this is the guy that was Christmas wrapped, obviously.
Yeah, this is the Christmas wrap. Like, people would complain that we didn't actually get this guy. Yeah, we did. He was on one of the bases. And here he is with his little cloak, his shoulder pad, and his sword. We also, that's your warrior. You also get a spellcaster with the little, like, the fly head and arm that you find on some of the Blight King models. With the staff, the little skull staff. We also get, obviously, our super singing bard Nurgling.
The bard Nurgling, yeah.
Absolutely.
Super excited to do what he's doing.
By the way, the zoom in on the bottom of that, go back, stay there.
Yep.
The zoom in on the bottom of that thing tells me that our previous suspicion was exactly correct.
Then clearly what's happened is they've just misplaced this Nurgling. He just needs to be rotated around.
He should not be standing there. That's not going to work down. That's not going to work out.
That is not a trickle-down effect you want to see. But that is, so here we go. This guy is fantastic. He's even more happier to be dancing in filth.
Sure.
And then obviously I pointed this guy out already who's eating the scroll on the base of the other guy.
Barbarian.
Yeah, barbarian, exactly.
There you go, yes.
The rage machine. And let me just say that, like, there's a bunch of other dudes. There's, like, the lounge guy on the tree. If you'll remember the blight tree, the guy's, like, kicking back all Hugh Hefner style on the blight tree. And a bunch of other sweet Nurglings. So I'm very, very excited. You get the little night Nurgling on the plague drone.
You could go fish out the guy from the 40K.
Yeah, with the actual helmet
on. Yeah.
Yep. Ta-da!
Exactly that dude. Yeah.
You know what I really wish? Like, I'm a terrible person for wishing this. I mean, not really, but I wish that they released war scrolls, 20 to 40 point war scrolls for named Nurglings.
For named Nurglings, yeah, sure, just specific Nurglings.
Yes, and let these guys actually have their own war scroll for 20 to 40 points.
Make them up as a Shadespire crew.
Like, well, let them be heroes. Like, don't misunderstand me. Like, let these guys be heroes with hero keywords, like, and take up a hero slot so that, you know, there's a utility cost there.
2 wound heroes.
Like, let them be 2 wound heroes. There you go. And these guys would be adorable. And I can tell you, they would be in all of my Nurgle armies.
Well, I mean, and they would sell that hand over fist. Imagine a Nurgle pack. A Nurgling pack, sorry.
Yes.
Right? So it's just like a single pack of all of the Nurglings, like your character pack, and it just has like the little knight, the little wizard.
Nurgling, yeah.
Yeah. All the Nurglings collected into one pack for sale. Those would fly off the shelf. They couldn't keep those in stock. That would be the skull pack of 2018. I'm just saying, GW, if you want to print some money, think about the Nurgling pack, the Nurgling action pack, okay? That's a moneymaker right there. People would buy that.
Yeah, and so, you know, to kind of wrap up, GW said with this tome, we're going to be getting, you know, Rotbringers and Demons of Nurgle, Rotbringers being the mortal stuff. They said they're going to it'll fill tactical holes, magic spells, and battalions. So hopefully we'll get a big suite of battalions that some of them will be useful. Like, don't get me wrong, I love my my Plague Touch Warband, and I plan on using it for the foreseeable future.
Even though that's not actually a Nurgle battalion.
Right, it's an ever chosen battalion. I don't care. I'll spend ally points on that. But I'd love for there to be some other viable battalions. And yeah, I'm looking forward to what they're doing. So I'm really excited about this release. So GW's doing everything. No, that said, it's funny. Like, I wasn't interested in Demons of Nurgle at all. I've always been a mortal Nurgle. But the reality is that my tournament prize winnings recently I had a glut of Nurgle or Plague Bearer boxes that showed up from Holy Havoc, and because I picked up a couple copies of Blight War. I think I have the full 90 Plague Bearers, like, in the hopper. I have 30 painted and I have 60 on sprue, I think. So, like, I could go full demon. It's enticing. I'm not gonna lie.
All right. So obviously this has been a busy news week, and there's more to come because we're only on like day 3. So we'll get more details about everything else spoiled. I assume we're gonna see all of this pretty fast, right in the new year. One has to assume we're not waiting long for all of this.
I think they said the book is pre-order on January 6th. Is I think what the talk is.
Yeah, that sounds right. So I mean, we're talking around the corner, right? I mean,
when they said that 2017 was the year of change, like they were not lying. Like Tzeentch dominated the Chaos release for 17, and 18 will likely be Nurgle. So, let me just as an aside, can I spit out my theory on Malign portents where we're going?
Go for it, man. Do it.
So the tagline is, Vince, what was the tagline? It's like the age of hope. Yeah,
It's
the
dead,
age of hope is death, not is dead. And I think what we're going to see in the story is actually Nurgle is going to come to ascendance. So I think Nave didn't do as well as she wanted to, and that Nurgle did sow the seeds in Blight War, like pretty prolifically, to the point where I think that Sigmar will have to go to. I think he will turn to Nagash and recut a new deal, in order to help stem the tide of Nurgle.
Gotcha.
So I think we will see, maybe early on we will see Death and Order allying, trying to combat Nurgle, and then what I think we'll do is then see a turn to Death, even probably betray Order, and try to move towards full ascendance or something like that.
Well, looking toward Malign portents. So, Cody, what are you hoping? One thing you want to see out of Malign portents. What's the one thing you want to see?
I know I'm stretching really far here, but a named Flesh Eater Quartz hero would be incredible. But since I'm probably not going to get that, I think a more coverage of just death in of itself rather than, say, like skeletons and Flesh Eater Quartz. Anything they do, and besides Ghost, I think anything they do forward would be great. And one big rumor is Nagash is going to make some Deathcast, eternal sort of things. And if he does do that, I got to say I'm definitely looking forward to that. But I'll discuss more of that into the live stream. I don't want to blow up everything right now.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, controversial subject, yes. And as was just pointed out, not in the comments, that battle tome has the new logo on it.
Yep.
So like we're talking, and that's what I said when if you look back when they first spoiled the logo, everybody was like, okay, you made a new logo, who cares? And I was like, no, they made a new logo. It's a big deal. Logos are like a thing that have to go through 8 layers of marketing approval and have executive approval. Like it's the biggest of deals. Like if you've worked for a major company anywhere near a marketing department where you had to make a logo for a major product, like especially a flagship product, it is one of the most complex, time-intensive things, and it has the most review gates you will ever do. Okay, so getting a thing like that changed is the biggest of deals because there has to be enough under it to justify it.
Yep.
You don't just change logos.
Right.
So I like
you will have a new
it.
portion of your bookshelf that will have a new set of logos.
Right. So like actually printing it on the book sealed that belief in me that like they are, really heralding that like we're all in on this, right? Like this is going to be big stuff coming.
This is not a flash in the pan.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. So I was actually pretty happy to see that. So I imagine we're going to be talking about this more next week because this is going to continue for at least 4 more days, and who knows what else we're going to get spoiled. I'm sure plenty. Yeah, like I am, as I mentioned at the top, and I will repeat again, I am fully prepared to be horribly uncomfortable for the next month as we go up to the lead up to this release and then the release itself over a couple weeks. It's going to be a horrible time for me. So happy New Year. But look, it'll all turn about. It'll be fair play when eventually somewhere down the line Slaanesh comes out and I'm drooling over it and Tom is completely uninterested. So I look forward to that.
As I'm rolling my eyes.
Correct. Yes. So let's talk about some pick of the week. So Cody, you're the guest. What would you like to share with the folks in the audience? What is your video, blog, anything like that you'd like to boost the signal on for people?
Okay, so I have one for 40K, but since we're not talking about that, I want to say that with the Age of Sigmar, it was shared on the Warhammer Age of Sigmar page as well as the community site, that with Malign Portents, Part 5 they're showing is called The Village, and the headline for that is Madness Stalks the Mortal Realms. Is it paranoia, or is it something worse? And if you watch the little itty-bitty little video clip they have on the Malign Portents website, it literally shows, the stereotypical dark, spooky village, and you see an adult female and adult male suddenly start levitating, and they have kind of like a blue aura emanating from their mouth and eyes. And that made me kind of jump out of my seat a little bit, because it's like, oh, what if Death is getting like some kind of mortal possessed kind of units, or what if there's something else that has something to do with that? Because we already have like Night Haunt and the Ghost, all that stuff, and vampires are all covered, but it's never really been touched into mortals being
possession.
Yeah, exactly. And it talks about that in the Age of Sigmar fluff, that the realm of death, the mortals in there are basically just slaves, and it doesn't really go any farther than that, especially tabletop wise. And I'd love to see where they go with that, because even in the headline itself, with talking about the madness goes directly into Flesh Eater Courts, in my opinion. But whenever I saw the actual little video clip, I was like, oh, that's even more exciting. So they're not touching on something that is already on the table. They're touching on something that isn't on the table. They're just kind of stroking over it and, keeping everybody guessing. So that excites me a lot.
That is such a good call. I hadn't thought about that, because I will openly say, when I saw what you're talking about, and I didn't even think about it, I just assumed it was ghosts or whatever. But as you talked about it, like, but I mean, Night Haunt style ghosts, right? Like, spooky spirits. But your point is so well made. Like, possession is such a classic part of a lot of like D&D and stuff like this, like fantasy literature, right? That a ghost's real threat is taking over somebody, right? Like, how many horror movies is that the basic premise of? Right, that a ghost possesses somebody, but there's really no representation of that in the game, where it's like where the ghosts are using somebody as a shell. Holy crap, that's a cool idea, man. That's a cool idea, Cody.
Can you imagine a unit of like spirit hosts like disappearing off the board as they possess a unit of free guild gunners?
Right, absolutely, yeah. There'd be
gunners turn, boom.
There'd be so many cool things you could do with that, right? Like, you could have existing spirit units have some way to possess other, units on the table. You could have people who show up with their shells and then can come back as other units. The way that, like, using reserve points, the way that, like, pink horrors become blue horrors become brimstones, right? You could do it the same way, where, like, you blow away the shell, but the ghost is still there. It could be the same sort of thing. Like, oh man, you just like, bang, bang, bang. Like, I'm firing now. Like, you just, a whole new world opened up, man. I can hear the Aladdin song playing, because I had not even considered any of that. Cody, that's a great call.
And so instead of possessed faction or dispossessed faction, it would be a
possessed. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that also opens up a lot of doors of, in the story, I know that with Neve Black Talon trying to stop the events of Blight War from unfolding, I think, like what you said earlier in the live stream, is Sigmar is going to inevitably, probably more than likely, come before Nagash and be like, hey, let's work out a new deal. We got to stop Nurgle. But everybody knows that in Age of Sigmar, Nagash is really, really after the Stormcast Eternals, because he wants those. And I've talked to a lot of Sigmar fans, and they're just like, well, what do you think Nagash wants of the Stormcast? Well, as Sigmar goes, Age of Sigmar goes, excuse me, when you die, absolutely nobody is safe from the clutches of Nagash.
Right.
And you even see in Shadespire, there's a character, I forget which one it was, one of the Stormcast characters. I think he's the dual-wielding hammer kind of guy, or not dual-wielding, he's two-handing a hammer. And on his little character description, it says that he's basically died so many times that he's just a cold husk, pretty much.
Right.
And as it goes for Stormcast, is when they die and they are reincarnated by and reforged by Sigmar, they're a little bit more cold and less human than they were before. And I really like to think that Nagash is totally working on making that happen. And then going into back to the whole village thing is that would be really cool to finally have a glimpse at what it is to have what the mortals are doing in the realm of death. Because I even strokes over a little bit in the Flesh Eater Court's battle tome is as these, noble folk and peasants and all the same are, thrown into conflict and stuff, they inevitably are forced to cannibalize to survive. And then the Ghoul Kings come around, and then you inevitably become part of the Flesh Eater Courts. And it's like, okay, cool. So we got kind of what it's like to, have the unfortunate, circumstance of becoming part of the Flesh Eater Courts, but it doesn't discuss what life itself is like in the realm of death, other than, probably nobody wants to go there. And I think that'd be great to see what Malign Portents is going to do in terms of that.
Sure, it's basically like the Cleveland of the mortal realms.
Yeah,
Apologies
absolutely.
to anybody who lives in Cleveland. It's a perfectly nice city, I'm sure. So here's the other, as I was thinking about this, I agree. By the way, it could also be that ghostly possession thing could be a response to Nurgle's invasion, like a willing thing. Like the living people going we have to defend ourselves, so they make a deal where look, I'll help you fight better, right? So you see what I'm saying? They let the ghosts possess them to protect them from life. They infuse themselves with death.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes a perfectly good point.
So there's just so many crazy ways they could go with that. I love it. Okay. Great hit. I'll link the video down below. Tommy, your pick.
I have to go with the 7 Days of Nurglemas.
Of course you do.
We mentioned it already. If you have not seen this wonderful new classic Christmas hymn, check it out.
It also gave us one of the greatest gifts of all time, the Duncan rocking out singing gif. So that's pretty great. And that'll get shared now ad nauseum. So Duncan gifts us with yet another gif. So there you go. For myself, my pick this week is going to be the same as last week, which is I want to discuss the Warhammer YouTuber 2017 end of year awards. Go vote. If you haven't voted yet, why haven't you voted? The link will be down below. Click it, vote, get your votes in, support your channels. The person we have on here may actually be one of the nominees in a category. So maybe that interests you or not. I don't know. But go vote. Please make your voice heard. I want to top the number of votes we had last year. We are very close. I want to blow it away. So if you have not yet voted, vote. Get those votes in. You have 4 days. You have until midnight Eastern Sunday night. But don't wait. Vote now. The link will be down there. Go vote. As I said, I can't throw the vote in the chat, or I would do it so that everybody in the chat could click it and vote now if you haven't voted already. But unfortunately, they don't allow that. So go vote. Vote now. There you go. Okay. Let's talk about some hobby time. Tom, what are you working on, buddy?
Fire Slayers.
Still working on your Fire Slayers, huh? How progressed is it?
All the body, flesh, and the freehand is all done. And so now I'm working on tattoos, again, it's just picking out details and then moving into just some of the weapons and stuff like that. So
will this be your first 30 done?
Yeah, my goal is to do 60 initially. For Volkites. That's what I want to have done by Adepticon, I think. I don't think I'm not planning on running full Fire Slayer at Adepticon. I know a lot of people are going full Fire Slayer. I think it's too predictable. So. Okay.
I think this is going to be funny because I bet the answers here are going to be similar. But Cody, what are you working on, man? What's on your table?
Fire Slayers?
That's what I thought was going to happen, which I like. So what's you got? What I think you mentioned offhand something like 20 Hearthguard and 60 Volkites you've got in front of you.
Yep. I actually recounted while I was sitting here. I've got 40 Volkites done in front of me. And then currently I'm working on another 50 Volkites, and I'll have them done hopefully within a week. And I'm about to start painting my 20 Hearthguard, and I have them fully magnetized to go from Auric Hearthguard, which have magma pikes, which are shooting, to just forming up Hearthguard Berserkers. And yeah, asking around a lot of people, nobody can seem to agree whether you should keep Berserkers with broad axes or with pole axes.
Oh, pole axes. There's no question there.
Yeah, a lot of people are just like, oh, broad axes. And I was like, but that mortal wound possibility.
Yeah. No. The mortal wounds is what you need because you don't have a reliable source of mortal wounds. That broad axe is dumb. Yeah. No, the pole axe is really the way to go. Like, I don't know anybody that's endorsing the axe. Like the thing that generates mortal wounds is the right answer.
Absolutely. And in terms of hobbying, I just did a Battlesmith a few days ago. I uploaded him to my Facebook page for the Venomous Wargaming if anybody wants to go there and check him out. I just finished painting my Venomous Wargaming Magma Droth. So instead of the stereotypical like orange, red, and black Magma Droth, he's actually blue, gray, and black with like a Lothern blue tongue. So he's in my page's color scheme. Nice. So he looks really cool. And yeah, that's really it. And then, yeah, lots and lots of Fire Slayers been getting painted. And I'm trying to get them ready for a battle report and might actually be filming with them tomorrow if I can get these Hearthguard done in time. So, yeah. Nice.
Awesome. For myself, I want to point out, people may have noticed I had a tan. I don't think people who would notice this. You have to be strangely obsessed with my aprons. But like, people may have noticed I had a tan apron that my wife had bought me for my birthday. But now I would just like to point out that my wife got me a second apron for Christmas that says, "I'm Vince." Which made me laugh so much when I unwrapped this. It says, "I'm Vince, Warhammer Weekly." That's all it says. I love it. Just in case you were curious, I am in fact Vince. So there you go. I got another apron now.
He does know that we can do like the lower third like bars, right?
No, I mean, I'm sure she doesn't know anything about how any of this works, but that doesn't matter. I still love it. I love that it says, "I'm Vince." That's hilarious to me. And it made me very happy. And then the other thing I'll just point out is I have a new piece of art on the wall. My wife was nice enough to get me the like limited edition Battle Sisters picture up there. So that's, which I didn't realize that Warhammer Art released like their top art sales of the year. And as I think I mentioned this last week, 3 out of the top 4 are Sisters of Battle.
Interesting.
Just saying, there might be some fans. Just throwing that out there. Whatever you want to do with that. I don't know. Maybe make an army in plastic that a lot of people would buy. But anyways, I love this painting. It's one of my favorite pieces of art from the Warhammer 40K universe. And so, and it's absolutely stunningly gorgeous. So there you go. My actual hobby time has been spent doing more Necromunda girls. I'm on girl number 4. I love it. You guys are talking about like doing these 60 models and all this. And I'm like, I'm on model number 4. Woo! But I love these girls. Like, they're really fun. So she's coming along. Only one more after her for the unit. So
the irony to this, Vince, is that I would say, "Man, that sounds so painful," and your response is, "Man, that sounds so painful."
Absolutely, yeah, it's totally true. Like, it's a nightmare. I look at like 60 guys like that. I'm like, no, just give me 4 models I can spend a week on or something. Absolutely. Like, I sat down when I start the model, the first thing I do is the flesh, and I'm like, yes, all right, I get to spend like 4 or 5 hours just glazing flesh. This is going to be relaxing, and I just get into it, and it's a Zen sort of meditation. So absolutely.
Nope.
That's fine.
You know how long my flesh takes? Not that long.
Sure. To each their own, my friend. There's no wrong way to paint. Unless it's the way that doesn't make you happy. This hobby is about fun and happiness. So whatever way you are painting, if it's making you happy, then you're doing the right thing. All right. Of course, we want to know what you're working on, so drop that down in the comments. Always interested. But because the main goal of this show is to provide some sort of barely passable white noise to entertain you while you fight the war against the gray, as always. But let's turn to the feature segment. The reason we've got Cody here I mean, other than we've wanted to have him on the show for a while, and I'm glad we finally got you on. But is to talk about Flesh Eater Courts. So as Malign Portent spins up and as death becomes more important, as I said at the top of the show, we want to talk about this sort of existing death faction, the one that got built out early and is still around, and I think a very full faction. So I thought we'd start, Cody, if you like, what attracted you to Flesh Eater Courts, and how do you, like, overall, what do you see as the way the army plays, the strengths and the weaknesses, etc.? Like, high level, what's your high level take on Flesh Eater Courts?
Well, I gotta say, initially, what got me into them was I literally walked into Goldmine Games here in Richmond, Texas, which is like my friendly local gaming store, and he has a huge selection of Warhammer stuff. Walked in there, I never tried Age of Sigmar at that point, and let's just say I had a burning desire to jump into it, and I kept browsing the store. And in Warhammer 40k, my main army is Space Wolves, so, you know, Werewolf Vikings, sort of, you know, cool vibe like that. So I was like,
Sure.
And I had World Eaters for 40k, so I was like, okay, I don't want to go strictly into Chaos or too big of a extremely melee, you know, gory army. But as I was looking around, I was like, vampires seem kind of cool, but they're not too supported in Age of Sigmar. And
Right.
But Mike, the guy that owns the shop, was like, well, Flesh Eater Courts are, you know, at least the Abhorrent Ghoul Kings have the vampire keyword. And I was like, really? So went over there and looked at it. I saw the Terrorgeist and the Zombie Dragon models. I absolutely love those models. The ghouls are pretty cool looking. And then I saw Crypt Horrors, and I was like, you know what? I'm sold on this. Let's go. I cleaned him out of Flesh Eater Courts products, went home with it, had them all painted. So in my army box for Flesh Eater Courts, I have 3 Terrorgeists, 2 Zombie Dragons, 5 Abhorrent Ghoul Kings, a Vargulf, over 200 fully painted ghouls, I think 18 Crypt Horrors, and I think 21 Crypt Flayers. So that whole army is done, and that's what I recorded with the most. And I really think that in terms of power, how Flesh Eater Courts do, I would say they're not competitively going to win you a tournament unless you are, you know, for one, a very good general, and two, really, really know how to outperform some of the big hitting armies, like Tzeentch stuff and Fire Slayers and what have you. With Flesh Eater Courts, they do have a very good amount of synergy between themselves, as well as good damage output without needing to ally anything. But the problem is they rely on their Deathless Courtier's ability, which is everybody within 6 inches of a hero gains like a 6-up ignore wounds, including mortal wounds. And, you know, it's not too good, but, I mean, that 6-up save comes in clutch, you know, when you least expect it.
Sure.
And it helps. But at the same time, your opponents figure out very, very quickly that if they kill the heroes, you can no longer have your heroes regenerate the models you're losing from your bigger units. Exactly. And of course, that's not too hard for certain armies. So you've got Stormcasts that deep strike. You've got Fire Slayers that can magma tunnel their shooting units. And not to mention armies like Iron Jaws and Khorne can just chew through one unit and just punch a hole through your lines.
Right.
And then they'll eat your heroes. And that's one really big downside of the Flesh Eater Courts is they're very much reliant upon the heroes. But when you look at it from a fluff side, Flesh Eater Courts play kind of like they think they're knights when they're really not. They're all completely delusional. They think they're knights when they're not. And as anybody would know from a military perspective, how big armies back in the medieval days worked is you had your leaders, and usually whenever the leaders died, the head from the snake was cut off, and usually the body started to, you know, writhe and frantically start to die. And that's pretty true with Flesh Eater Courts. If you kill leaders, it's like, uh-oh, I'm in really big trouble now.
Right.
But Yeah, they're not as supported, I would say, as like some of the bigger Codex armies, but they are really. I love to play them. I think they're pretty strong, and I think that a lot of the things people say negatively about them aren't fully true. People are just like all the time on Facebook forums. They're just like, "Oh, if you want to win, don't play them." And I'm like, well, I mean, that's a really grimy reason not to pick up an army. I love playing them. I may not win every time with them, but I always enjoy playing my Flesh Eater courts. And yeah, like I said, they're not too high on the power scale, but they just will probably more than likely never get absolutely crushed. And
yeah,
yeah.
I totally agree with everything you said. I really do. They're interesting. They're very much like a mid-tier sort of army, whatever that means. But they're a really interesting army in their mechanics. I think like my overall view of them is that they act a lot like a very interesting or particular type of glass cannon, right? Because most of their units aren't very tough. There's a lot of like 5-up and low saves scattered around the army.
Right. Yep.
Now, that being said, they regen, like if their heroes are intact and unmolested, they really can regen models, even significant models, right? Like it's going out of style. If you're sort of banging on all cylinders with your full clutch of heroes, it is quite impressive how quickly you can regen some of your units, right? And by the way, the guys who regen units, it's not like they themselves are that outrageously expensive, all right?
Absolutely not. They're they're pretty well priced.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Vargul courtier or whatever, who's like a sort of, we'll talk about him more a little later, but he's basically like an 8-wound dude with a decent enough attack profile. I mean, the reality is every turn out of him, you're going to get, a couple ghouls and probably a crypt horror crypt flare or two, right? Pretty easy, pretty reliably. But again, he's like a 5-up save dude, right?
Right.
And
Yes,
so on and so forth down the line.
And if they have any ability to remove models at distance, he'll probably get sniped.
Right, exactly. Like it's it's an army that is hyper susceptible to that like long range sniping type of thing. That being said, against an enemy melee force, if they're not just like to the nines killy, like a murder host style of corn, I think these guys absolutely compete in there because they can produce an overwhelming number of attacks, right?
Like I think like some Nurgle armies would just really struggle against these guys because of volume of attacks.
Right, not having the shooting to remove the heroes.
Yep.
Not having like they have a low enough save. This army doesn't have a huge amount of rend, but it has enough. It has like it has a decent amount of -1 rend, like is what I would say. And so if you're tend to be lowish armor, these guys just generate an outrageous number of attacks, right? Between the spells that they can cast, the support, the battalions, their actual Flesh Eater Court special ability, which we'll talk about. So and their units, if they're not wiped out, will just tend to keep coming back, right?
So if you don't have high killie power, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree with you. I think they're actually a really interesting counter to something like a Nurgle, right? That doesn't have that like hard-hitting murder host power or something like that, right? Where they could just blow through a whole unit and completely eliminate it. Yeah. Tom, what any other thoughts you wanted to add as far as high level how you see the army?
No, I mean I think I would agree with all of that. They're surprisingly hitty, and they're fairly mobile for a death army,
Right.
which is something that I think that a lot of people don't think about. I think about Ghoul Patrol being able to get that alternative deployment, and get fairly like easy 9-inch charges first turn. Like the charges aren't easy, but being able to at least get that roll first turn is not too difficult with Ghoul Patrol, for example.
No, and they have a fair amount of like flying units and higher move units, right? Just kind of in general. I mean, your base battle line troop is a 7-inch move.
Yep.
Right? I mean, or sorry,
Ghouls are 6 and
6-inch
7.
move, yeah. There you go. Thank you. Yes, that's what I was trying to say. Your base battle line troop is a 6-inch move, and your next up guys are 7-inch, right? So I mean, that's decent movement speed for sure, just for your basic foot troops, right? You're slightly faster than average. So I mean, and yes, like I agree with you. The alternate deployment coming out of some of the battalions, etc. They are they're certainly more mobile than, say, zombies or skeletons or that kind of crap, right?
Yeah. I mean, you got to think about what space that you're competing in the Grand Alliance. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And in terms of just filming battle reports with them is my opponents all the time see a block of ghouls and they're just like, they're not too fast. They don't have any rend. I'm not going to worry about them. I'm like, yeah, but if the ghouls make a charge and you don't stop them quick enough to put them, I'd say, below 20 models, they're going to rack up a lot of attacks. And, I can roll a good amount of, 4+. And, it adds up. If they're over 20, they get a +1 of their attack characteristics. So then each ghoul has 3 attacks apiece.
Yep.
And, they're on the... I think they're 23 millimeter bases. They're really small ones.
The 25s, yeah.
Yeah, 25s. Exactly. And they can really pile in. And there's one battle report against Unclean Covens where my opponent, David, had a 20-man unit of executioners. And I think I had a 30 or 40-man unit of ghouls. And the ghouls almost completely annihilated the executioners in one swing.
Sure. I mean, and then combined with the fact, that the regular Abhorrent Ghoul King spell, Black Hunger, tops him up again, right? Puts him up at 4 attacks or whatever. So,
absolutely. And that can go on Flayers, Horrors, or Ghouls, and it makes them that much scarier. And Horrors also don't have any rend, but they deal, I think, 3 attacks apiece and 2 damage apiece with 4s and 3s. And if they roll a 6 to wound, it's an automatic 3 damage. And... Right. A lot of people are just like, oh, well, they're not too good on the rend. And it's like, yeah, but they just swarm you in attacks. And 9 times out of 10, that's more than enough to deal with it. The only problems I have with not having rend is usually against armies like, I know like Seraphon Saurus Guard, they get some pretty nasty saves if they got some nasty rules. Yeah.
Yep.
And Stormcast. Like, some Stormcast units are really hard to take down if you don't have any rend. But I'd say generally in the Age of Sigmar, that's not too much of an issue if you don't have a whole lot of rend.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on your meta, right, and what you're playing against, because you're exactly right. There are some of those just like turtle armies where they roll around with lots of units on like 2+ saves or 3-up reroll 1s or some nightmare like that, right? And it's a really tough egg to crack, right? But if you're talking about fighting, say, normal stuff that tends to be on 4-up saves, yeah, they'll do the work. And it shouldn't be understated. I think you made such an important point there. I want to really put a pin on it. Getting 4 attacks out of a 25 mil sized model, right?
Sure. Yeah. On 4-up. There's no 5s in that.
Right. Well, and keep in mind they reroll 1s.
Yeah.
On that too, if there is a Ghoul King around. So and there's all other different ways you can get different rerolls, and we'll talk about that in, the sort of delusions and things like that as we get there. Not to mention the fact that you can trigger whole secondary attack phases if they kill something, right? That's sort of their allegiance ability. But the thing about that is, I think a lot about power on the base size, right? Like how much power per amount of space you're taking up on the table, because that really matters. Especially when things start getting tight and moving around. Like, one of the big drawbacks to the Maw Crusher is the size of that base, right? Like, so much can get in yes, he's a kill machine, but he's so huge he can't fit everywhere. Lots of things can get on him. Those little ghouls can just filter in everywhere and surround something, right? So, I mean, that is not to be underestimated for sure.
Well, and that's one of the drawbacks. Let me just, as an aside, for Fire Slayers. We were talking about how strong Fire Slayers are. Those dudes are on 32 mil bases. They, with only 2 attacks a model, like, they are dispersing their, that actually hurts them quite a bit.
Right.
Again, people don't think about the actual consequence of how large their base is versus how many attacks they're getting.
Yep. Absolutely. So it's one of the things I quite like is that your core troop can generate so much firepower coming out of a very small unit, right? Out of a very small model, I should say. Okay, so let's dig in. I've mentioned it like 100 times. So do you want to take us through you kind of mentioned the allegiance ability already, which they have they get the death 6-up save, right? Of when they're near heroes. But then they also, have this really interesting sort of secondary ability of what happens when they get in a fight and slay a model. So do you want to sort of touch on their that and how their delusions works, because that's sort of another unique allegiance ability that only they have.
Yep, absolutely. So Feeding Frenzy is one of the allegiance abilities for Flesh Eater Courts. So basically what happens is if in the combat phase a Flesh Eater Courts unit completely destroys an enemy unit, you immediately roll a dice. On the roll of a 6 or more, they get to pile in and, well, let me read it specifically. They get to pile in and attack a second time. But it states specifically that at the end of that, it doesn't allow Feeding Frenzy to happen more than once. So you can't, like, roll real hot and get, like, 3 Feeding Frenzies. Otherwise, that'd be really terrifying. But on a 6+, in my playthroughs of Flesh Eater Courts, which I've played a lot of them, it doesn't happen often. But when it does happen, your opponents are like, oh, crap. Like, that's going to hurt so bad. There's only been maybe 2 or 3 times that's happened on a behemoth character of mine, and that's very substantial when you get a Terrorgeist that can pile in and attack a second time. It even comes in very handy that you have, say, a random number of ghouls, and they completely destroy a battle line unit that belongs to your opponent, and suddenly they get to pile in and attack a second time. And look at that, your opponent's general is right there behind that unit, and now he's susceptible to getting piled into. So a lot of people are like, oh, it sucks. And I was like, well, it's an uncommonly happening ability, but when it does happen, it's always going to be good. Like,
it can shift momentum.
Exactly. And I've had it happen to where... I've had it to where my opponents have had me on the back foot, where they've taken a 6-man unit of Crypt Horrors down to like 2, and I've been really low on hope of them actually pulling it back, and then all of a sudden you get some synergy together. So you get like a Vargulf that regenerates that unit. Say you roll really hot, they go up to a 6-man unit, they fight back, they kill something, they roll a 6 on Feeding Frenzy, they get to pile in and attack again. Then your opponent's like, holy crap, like I can really see where Flesh Eater Courts really get their power from. And that goes with what Vince said just a few minutes ago, is if you do not take care of their heroes, you're going to get hurt bad. So if you're not as killy as them, they're going to be very tough to remove. For instance, Seraphon, every time I've played them, they have a very hard time trying to remove whole units and heroes, because they have a pretty limited number of shooting, and Seraphon aren't exactly hard to prevent them from shooting. And David just came in possession of a huge number of Seraphon. Every time I get locked in combat with him, he's like, oh, looks like I'm stuck here for a while.
Yep. Yeah, they just don't have the melee power to actually beat down your healing amount, right? I mean, like, their only hope is Bastiladon laser blasts to shoot off your heroes. Yeah. It's just not going to get the job done fast enough if you're talking about, 4 or 5 heroes on the table, especially if a couple of them are Terrorgeist riders. It's just those dino lasers can only do so much, right?
Or they could just get teleported out of combat.
Yep, or that too.
Sure, I mean, you can move them, but they're not going to kill the unit. That doesn't.
Sure.
If in an objective-based game, just leaving doesn't usually win, right?
Right. But like to reposition to get that hero or whatever. Like there are opportunities.
Yeah, what's interesting about it to me is I think it needs to inform but not decide the way you play. There's an echo of this ability in Iron Jaws I'm very familiar with, right? So like the Iron Jaws ability is when you slay a unit, you get to immediately trigger another unit to fight, right? Out of sequence. This is a variation on that. When you kill a unit, you get to pilot and attack a second time. What this means is, but the truth of it remains the same. When I play my Iron Jaws, I look at chaff units as like, yes, opportunities, right? I am excited when I see tiny chaff units, people who've bubble wrapped with garbage. I'm like, yep, I'm gonna get in that, because like you take those ghouls, you pile in, you wrap around so you're within 3 inches of touching a second unit, right? And then you pile in with those 4 attacking the quad ghouls, as I'll call them, and you just blow this little chaff unit off the table. You get that number, boom, you're right on the meaty unit that they were trying to protect, right? Is it going to happen for sure? No. But if you set yourself up for it, but you can create more opportunities to trigger it by making sure that you capitalize on all those little chaff units, right? So to me, things like that are where you can sort of play to both chewing off their little guys that might be sitting on objectives, triggering second attacks, but also getting rid of easy chaff things, stuff like that. So yeah, I quite like it.
And then more things they got for allegiance abilities are their delusions. So before you select your general's command trait at the beginning of any game, you pick a delusion, and there's 6 of them. Obviously, like anything in Sigmar that has a table, you can either choose to roll a d6 on it, or you can choose to pick it. So with their delusions, this is really just a way for your general to kind of thematically influence the way his army wages war. So you've got one that's like Crusading Army. You can reroll dice rolls of 1s when you make run or charge rolls for friendly Flesh Eater Courts units. And that's the whole army. So as you guys can all imagine, that can be very handy. And you'll see in my battle reports, I love using Crusading Army.
That is so potent. Like, that is
Absolutely.
just beyond potent.
Yep.
Because it means that you don't get screwed on Snake Eyes charges. I mean, like, it's almost statistically impossible. It could happen, but it's so unlikely. You have a basically, 36 squared, something like that, chance of getting Snake Eyes, right?
Yep, and with what Tom said earlier about the Ghoul Patrol, the way I've done this to Sylvaneth before is I used a Ghoul Patrol to get 60 ghouls behind his lines, and then I used an artifact that Flesh Eater Courts have access to that once per game in the charge phase, models within 6 inches of the model that's carrying this artifact can add +3 of their charge rolls, and they can declare charges up to 15 inches instead of 12.
Yep.
So then you take Crusading Army and you get to reroll 1s. So you're turning that 9-inch charge into a 6 with rerolling 1s. And that's very handy in getting in. Mm-hmm. And then you've got the other delusions like the Royal Hunt. You can reroll hit and wound rolls of 1 for attacks made by Flesh Eater Courts units when they target a monster. And that's really good because that's both shooting and in melee. And granted, Flesh Eater Courts don't have much in terms of shooting, but the zombie dragons, let me tell you guys, when they wound on 2s, when they're unwounded with their breath attack, you always roll 1s, in my experience.
I feel your pain. I know that feeling very well. Yes.
Yep,
that is one of my favorite rules in the entire game, as a slight aside, is that the Keeper of Secrets, who wounds on a 2 with her big giant sword, comes with an automatic reroll wounds of 1. I'm like, yes, score. That means I'll actually get to wound every so often.
Yep, and then you've got one that's like the Feast Day. You can reroll dice rolls of 1s when rolling to see if Flesh Eater Courts units become subjected to a feeding frenzy. So instead of rolling a flat 6, you also get to reroll 1s whenever you do a feeding frenzy. So that's nice. You've got a Matter of Honor, so you can reroll hit rolls of 1 for attacks made by Flesh Eater Courts units, and they target a hero. If it's your enemy's general, you also get to reroll wound rolls of 1. And that becomes very substantial because if you choose that, there are certain armies that have a lot of heroes and some that don't. And if you do take that against an army of heroes, it's going to be very worth it to use that, obviously, because sure, the ghouls get to reroll 1s if they're within, I think, 10 inches of an abhorrent Ghoul King, but like flayers don't, and that could be very substantial because they have the fly keyword. They could fly over the battle line, get into a hero's face, and reroll 1s to hit and 1s to wound if it's the general.
Well, yeah, and that's what's important to realize with this. We're not talking about like the command trait choice or something here, right? This is just your allegiance ability, and it's army-wide. So, like, yeah, none of these buffs sound incredibly amazing, like world-turning, but at the same time, the fact that you're just picking this army-wide buff, right, it's no small thing. I think the charge one is my favorite, but can we talk for a moment about how they played to the fact that this is like the remnants of a Bretonnian-like kingdom? Through this, because they are called like the Crusading Army, the Royal Hunt, the Feast Day, the Grand Tournament. Like Bretonia's back. Unfortunately, it didn't do so well. They're all cannibals now.
Yes, Bretonia is dead. They like it.
And they're very happy about it. So yeah, I like everything about the delusions. I think it's a cool choice. Not to dig on every one of them, but then obviously we've got the command traits and the artifacts. What are your what's your go-to out of each of those? What's the one or two out of each of them that you like?
Well, I honestly gotta say that with command traits, I always love to take completely delusional. So this is gonna go right back to the delusions, but as long as the general is alive at the start of your hero phase, you can change the delusion the army suffers from to a different one of your choice. So that is extremely synergetic with an army because you can go from once you get that charge in and it flips over to a new turn, you can do away with Crusading Army and pick up maybe the Feast Day or the Royal Hunt or a Matter of Honor. And that's very substantial because it's very synergetic. But another one I like to take on top of that command trait is if you don't want to do completely delusional, you can take Dark Wizardry, which several factions seem to have this now in General's Handbook 2017. But you get to add one to casting and unbinding rolls for the general. And if the general is not a wizard, they gain the wizard keyword and can use the same magic abilities as an abhorrent Ghoul King. So he gains Black Hunger, Mystic Shield, and Arcane Bolt. And that's pretty synergetic too, because now you have a, quasi abhorrent Ghoul King sort of with the magical abilities, but a lot of more competitive Flesh Eater Courts armies like to take a Crypt Infernal Courtier, which is the Crypt Flayer version of a hero. So you give him Dark Wizardry, and now he's a wizard.
Right. Yeah, I would also give special mention to the Savage Beyond Reason, which for your general turns that Feeding Frenzy roll from a 6 into a 5. So if you're under that and the Delusion, you're rerolling 1s and then fishing for 5s or 6s. And the Ghoul King on Zombie Dragon can kill out a small unit pretty easy. And getting that dude piling in and attacking twice, it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Absolutely.
As things go, it ain't shabby.
It's basically a time walk.
It's basically a time walk. Yeah, it's basically.
And then moving on to artifacts. With artifacts, my favorites that I always love to take is one of them is the Grim Garland. So it subtracts 2 from the bravery of enemy units within 6 inches. So if you take, whether it be just a Courtier hero, or you take a Abhorrent Ghoul King on Terrorgeist or a Zombie Dragon, anybody within 6 inches is at -2 to their bravery. And that's very substantial whenever you're a bit of a glass cannon army. And Terrorgeist also deal mortal wounds based off of a modifier to your opponent's bravery. So unwounded, Terrorgeist have a 6 characteristic. You roll a d6 and you add that 6 to it. And your opponent suffers mortal wounds in the difference based upon his bravery. And if you get it with a -2 to his bravery, that's very substantial. That has the potential of causing a lot of mortal wounds, especially against an army, say, like Skaven, who have really crappy bravery.
Yeah, Iron Jaws come to mind.
Yeah, it is an Iron Jaws destroyer. It really is. Because all of a sudden, brutes who aren't normally that afraid of running regularly will bleed 1 or 2 models if one runs. Right. And there's so many things I like. I totally agree with you on that artifact. The reason I love it is because a lot of times these artifacts are like minus whatever 1 or 2 in the battle shock phase or something like that. Right. When rolling for battle shock. Mm-hmm. This isn't like that. This is just -2 all the time.
Yep.
Right. And so exactly like because your Crypt Flayers also have a bravery dependent missile attack as well. But that has a very small number because it's like what a d6 + 1. Right, or something like that. So, but if there's, and in a lot of cases, that's just nothing. It's going to amount to nothing. Right? Mm-hmm. But knocking a unit like a 6 bravery unit, which is pretty standard, like a lot of units in the game that aren't like the bravery 10 people, right? Go to suddenly, or like bravery 6 is probably your common sort of most of your living people and stuff like that. Those guys suddenly becoming bravery 4. Oh, the game has changed, right? Like that is a way different number. It's amazing how big of a difference that makes. So yeah, I agree with you completely on that artifact. I think that's a big deal.
Absolutely. And then I already touched on the Flayed Pennant, so I'll skip that. But with Blood River Chalice, you can use this artifact once per battle in your hero phase, and you get to immediately heal D6 wounds, and that's very substantial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, D6
that's
wounds
the
on that
vampire lord. Like that's the vampire chalice.
Absolutely.
I love it, and you know, most of your heroes can already heal to some degree or another, but in my opinion, because of the fact that you know, saves aren't really your strong suit in this army, so piling on more ability to heal wounds, not a bad thing ever, right?
Finding durability somewhere else in the army.
Yeah, and you already, with at least on Ghoul Kings on mounts, they already heal D3 wounds at the beginning of the hero phase, and then you can add a further D6 to it if you wish once per battle.
Yeah, exactly. That's a heck of a swing. Potential 2 to 9 wounds coming back. That's a lot. That's a lot of wounds. That's erasing somebody's damage chart, like, for sure.
Exactly.
All right. So let's talk about, we mentioned heroes. Let's talk about some heroes. Obviously, this is, as we mentioned, this is a hero-driven army, right? So basically what you're looking at here is you've got the Ghoul King himself, and then you can throw him on either of the big monsters, on a Terrorgeist or on a Zombie Dragon. And then you've got the sort of courtier versions of all of the troops themselves, right? Like the Ghast courtier, the Haunter courtier, the Infernal courtier, and then the big boy, the Vargulf courtier. Overall, I think what, like, my quick read on their heroes is they're all reasonably enough costed. Their saves are all pretty not great. like all not completely universally, but there's a lot of 5-ups floating around in this nonsense, right? 5-up, 4-up, that kind of thing. But they do have a higher than average number of wounds, which at least I appreciate that. Like the Haunter's got 6 wounds, the Infernal's got 6 wounds, the Vargulf's got 8 wounds. Like, it's not the most in the world, but it's also not bad. And as you pointed out, it is easy to manufacture another wizard, right? To turn one of these guys into a wizard through your command trait choice. So he can be running around Mystic Shielding himself. Also, most of these guys have some ability to heal, like the Vargulf heals D3 wounds if he slayed a model in combat, right? Which is, pretty likely for a guy with a -2 Ren D3 damage attack and 4 -1 Ren 2 damage attacks. Like, he's probably going to kill a model. So there you go. But what's your overall take on the heroes? What do you like? What do you run with?
Overall, the only hero I do not like to rely upon is really just the Crypt Ghast Courtier, which is the Ghoul Courtier. He's really not that good. So as long as you kind of use him as more of a support character rather than having to rely on him for fighting and damage capability, then you'll be fine. The Crypt Infernal Courtier, which is the Flayer version, he can hit very hard, as well as the Crypt Haunter Courtier. As everybody probably knows, if you know anything about Flayers, if they roll a hit roll of a 6, it's straight up a mortal wound. With a Crypt Infernal Courtier, it's 2 mortal wounds, and he has, I believe, 4 or 5 attacks. Yep. And I've had it to where he's rolled 666s, and bam, there's 6 mortal wounds immediately, and that's usually half a unit just completely destroyed right then and there.
Yeah, and those guys, all those dudes are like the Infernal Courtier. I think is, I like him for his points. I really do. Like he's actually my pick for, I think, my favorite of the lower range. Because he's got the 12-inch speed, he's on the 4-up save. He refills your Crypt Flayers, like that's his role, and I like the Crypt Flayers a lot. And he's got the mortal wound output, which to me is the thing that this, like, we talked about sort of the lack of really good rend. Well, mortal wounds is the best rend, right? And so this guy can be like, this guy and the Flayers can be nutcrackers, right? Because they can, and again, pumping attacks, pushing more attacks, all that kind of stuff. There, you have those abilities in this army.
I'm surprised that you haven't done these up, Vince, as Bretonnians.
Well, I mean, the problem is all my extra Bretonnians are knights, and it's really hard to turn knights into these guys, like, just because of what they are. You know what I mean? Like, these tend to be like oversized dudes on foot.
Yeah, that's true.
Believe me, it's an appealing thing. I just, I don't have 100 extra men-at-arms. I have 30 extra knights. So
Fair.
hope something like that. We'll see what happens. But anyway, can we talk about the spells that the main three guys have and how I like all of them?
Sure. So the three main guys being the Ghoul King on foot, the Ghoul King on Zombie Dragon, the Ghoul King on Terrorgeist.
Yep.
Each of their spells have a place and a time to be used, and each of their spells are excellent. So starting from, top to bottom, let's say that, in terms of points at least, the Zombie Dragon Ghoul King has an ability called the Black Hunger, and this is, or Feeding Frenzy, excuse me. And this is very substantial. It's a casting value of 6, so it's a little above 50% chance of always going off. And if it does go off, you can reroll all failed wound rolls for Flesh Eater Courts models from your army within 10 inches of the caster. And that's very substantial because you can take that 20 or 30 man brick of ghouls that rerolls ones, and now they're rerolling wounds on top of hit rolls of ones. So they get very frantically scary quite quickly.
Yeah, I want to put a pin on this spell and why I love it so much, but also talk about a limitation of it. This is a fantastic spell. Like all their spells cast on low numbers, like 6s and 5s and stuff.
Not 7s.
Not 7s. So 6 is eminently more doable. It's a bubble cast, right? So he just puts it on himself, and then it's not about who's around him. It's about in the combat phase, right? Mm-hmm. So he can be wherever and then swoop into combat and grant this ability. And rerolling all failed wounds, a lot of this army is just 4 up or 3 up to wound, right? And the fact that you can just suddenly be rerolling all failed wounds, that's we talked already about how many more attacks how many attacks this army can generate. So anytime you start rerolling, that's just power. Now, the only limitation to this, okay, is that keep in mind this spell is all Flesh Eater Courts models from your army within 10 inches of the caster, not units. So you can't whiptail or snaketail one crypt ghoul into that 10-inch bubble and then make the whole unit reroll wounds, right? So you've got to be in the bubble. That being said, a 10-inch bubble rippling off of that the dude on Zombie Dragon, that's a pretty big bubble.
Yeah, especially considering he's riding around on a pie plate.
Yeah, exactly. So he's covering some space with that. And I agree. Mixing this guy with the flares you previously mentioned, where they're mortal wounding off. Yep. Seems real good. More chances to get more mortal wounds. I like it.
Yep, and that's also synergetic with Crypt Horrors because they hit on 4s, but they reroll all failed wound or hit rolls if they're within 15 inches of an Abhorrent Ghoul King.
Yep.
And then if you get Feeding Frenzy off, they're rerolling wounds, so they're rerolling everything then. And granted, they don't have any rend, but if they're in combat with something that doesn't have that great of a save, or if your opponent just rolls really unlucky and they do have a good save, the Horrors can punch a very big hole. And usually they do when I use them.
Yeah, I mean, it roughly doubles the damage output of the Horrors in a given turn. Right, if both of those things because both those things have to be true. They will be near the hero, and they will be.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
And then other spells are for the Terrorgeist version. Unholy Vitality, once again, casting value of a 6. You pick a unit within 18 inches, and they get to ignore wounds and mortal wounds on the roll of a 5 or a 6. So you get the 6-up Deathless Courtiers, and then you can get a 5 or a 6-up Unholy Vitality. So that's pretty good, especially if you know one of your units is, say, holding an objective or doing something very important that they cannot die, and your opponent's going to really focus on them. You make them that much harder to kill.
Yeah, I know Tom's a big fan of stacking these kind of saves. So, again...
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I that is... I think that is honestly my favorite spell in this clutch because... one of the things, sort of one of the weaknesses to this army in my mind is their lack of a true anvil, right? Like a really hard tar pit unit you can stick up there and just like know it's just going to get punched and punched and punched and still be standing there. They can heal, but if they get overwhelmed, they get blown up and then they can't heal back, right? So it's about keeping something alive. This is such a wonderful synergy with the basic premise of how this army needs to win, because it turns the enemy's grind to kill them into just a much more monumental task. I mean, another 5-up, let's call it ward save or damage prevention save, is such a big deal, as Tom will attest.
Agreed.
And then finally, the last one was the Black Hunger, which we already mentioned, which is, make another attack. Seems pretty good to me.
Yep, and it's all melee profile. So I usually like to get a zombie dragon or terrorgeist in for the charge, and then cast that on them, and there you go, one more extra attack for your big hard hitting unit. And yeah, I absolutely, I'm pretty sure any player in Age of Sigmar would never scoff at an extra attack.
Well, absolutely. I mean, already the zombie dragon, we didn't dive too deep in him, but this dude does have a 3-inch range bite that's 3 attacks on a 4-up, 3-up, -2 Ren D6 damage, right? It's a cannonball bite. The issue with it is, of course, that it's on that 4-up to hit, right? Now, we've talked about lots of ways where you could be mitigating that or having rerolls of that through the delusions or other things that are going on, like rerolling 1s or something. But nonetheless, like when it comes to those kind of numbers, more attacks is good. Those cannonball bites are so freaking scary, right?
Absolutely. And
So-
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, and the same is true for the Terrorgeist, who of course has the 6 mortal wound.
Yep,
bite.
the gaping maw rule.
Yep, exactly. Like anytime you're putting more attacks out of those guys, it's very
Terrifying.
frightening.
Yeah,
It really is.
because it can really shift the battle. One dice roll can change momentum.
I've had the Fang Maw on the Terrorgeist is 3 attacks base, 4s and 3s, Ren 2, D6 damage. But if you roll a 6 or more for the wound roll, then it becomes an immediate 6 mortal wounds. And I've had times where I've rolled double 6s, and my opponent's just been like, "Oh wow!" and 12 mortal wounds, and that's been usually an entire unit just instantly wiped by the Terrorgeist. And if you throw that at a hero, most infantry-based heroes usually have maybe 5, maybe 6 wounds, usually pushing it, and all you need to do is a wound roll of 6, and usually they're gone.
Yeah, even heavily ward saved heroes, like what Nurgle would be running, are going to be hard pressed to weather 12 mortal wounds.
Exactly. And I fought a friend of mine here. He has a Khorne Bloodbound army, and I had a Terrorgeist split his attacks on 2 of his heroes. It was Fang Maw on one and the Claw attacks on the other, and I killed both of them. So I had double chance to roll on Feeding Frenzy, and I got it. And I was like, that is humongous. Because he was like, oh yeah, there's a good chance I could survive this. And all I did was roll a single 6 to wound on the Fang Maw. And I was like, oh, Khorne hero's dead.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I had a fun little time where one of these slammed into my, I was running a Molder army and I had a Hell Pit Abomination. I was like, I can handle this thing. And then he double 6'd me and it was like 12 mortal wounds. And I was like, nope, never mind. I can't. He's dead now. That thing's dead now. Oh, well. So, yeah, I mean, it'll just shock you. Like, anything that has an ability to do 6 or 12 mortal wounds is pretty good. It's not bad. You're never going to be like, wow, I don't like that. No, that's always good. That's a positive. That's a put a hash in the positive category.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's talk about some battle line. So this to me is the area that drives me the most crazy with this army. Because the only baseline battle line you get, right, is your ghouls. Your old school ghouls. Now, if you're completely in Flesh Eater Court's allegiance, and this is the part that drives me nuts. If you're completely within Flesh Eater Court's allegiance, right, then you can add the Crypt Flayers, but only if you have the Crypt Infernal Courtier as your general, right? If you're in if you're in completely, you can add Crypt Horrors, but only if you have the Crypt Haunter Courtier as your general. I don't like that their other two conditional battle lines are also general dependent, and neither of those generals have a de facto command ability.
Absolutely.
This is the weak spot of the army to me. This is the part that needs some tender loving redesign. Like, why? Why are we forcing the suboptimal or like just give these guys a command ability and I'm back to okay.
Well, I mean, they at least have the option of having conditional battle line.
Sure. I mean, totally fair. It's not like a Caradron Overlord situation. But that being said, if you want, like, it's not like those other Abhorrent Ghoul Kings don't have,
Sure.
fun command abilities. Some of them do. Some of them are underwhelming. But they're just off the table, right? If you need these other units, if you don't just want to run big packs of ghouls as your battle line. And that to me is the depressing side of this. What have you generally done? Do you use like one of the infernal courtiers as your general to get around this, or what's your general strategy with this?
Usually I do a infernal courtier as general to get the flayers in. Not so much for the horrors, because usually if I'm going for a horror list, I already am taking the ghouls to back them up anyways, because ghouls and horrors really do synergize pretty good together. That ghouls can either absorb the blow or try to make room for the horrors, and then the horrors come in and sweep the enemy away if they have to. But like you said, it is a really big kick in the side to the Flesh Eater Court's army that it's general dependent. Honestly, from a fluff standpoint and a lore standpoint, it does not make sense that the king is there, but he's not in command, so to say.
Right, exactly. Yeah, this is the evolution of a noble knight army, right? So like the king should be the general, and his other nobles should still be empowered to whatever. Yes, I agree.
And then, the command abilities that the kings have is not too great anyways. It's summoning, and as the scale goes up from on foot to terrorgeist to zombie dragon, it goes ghoul, a 10-man unit of ghouls, a 3-man unit of either flayers or horrors, and then a courtier. And it's like, okay, well, sure, we have a command ability, but that's not exactly amazing, and a lot of people don't actually mess around with summoning very often. Very rarely have I seen an opponent that actually does summon.
Do you know an easy way that you could get around design wise is just say that, like, if you have allegiance, Flesh Eater Court allegiance, and one of these heroes is included in your army.
Sure, absolutely. Just yes, the presence, not he needs to be the general. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Which that would then make sense, because then it's the noble bringing his retinue, right? The story totally changes and makes sense again. Just that easy. Yeah, 100%. Like, I think to me, the two big changes I'd love to see with this force to make it much more fulfilling to build are, one, I would like to see the restrictions around battle line changed, eased, altered, whatever. And two, I would like to see actual command abilities that aren't just summoning, the 3 different variants of summoning. Again, not they can't be useful. It is neat to be able to walk on other courtiers if you have reserve points or whatever. Like, it's not like that's a terrible thing. It's just like, I feel like that's a component missing. Like, command ability is such a general whiff in this army, right? Like, I guess I get to make ghouls immune to battle shock. Again, like that's going to be your play every round, pretty much. Like that is playing this army, right?
Absolutely.
And that's just kind of unfortunate, because it would be neat to have, like, everybody else gets to play with their command abilities. Why do I have to literally construct my army in these weird acrobatic, sort of stretched ways just to use one? Like, that's just that it seems
it smacks of old design.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, to me, it is the failing of the army. Like, it's what needs a redesign, because I think you can do the toughness as refilling with a low save, right? Like the toughness as healing. I think that's a good take. I think you can do the offensive power as massed attacks and not necessarily Ren. I think that's a good take. I think you can do the interesting movement sort of variations they have. They've got some good battalions with abilities, all these kinds of things. Like, that's all good. But this core construction element is what's lacking to me. That's the hole in my mind.
Yep, and I agree.
All right. So let's finish out. Let's wrap up here. And we'll talk about just some monsters and other units. We've touched on a lot of these and just errantly as we're going through. How often do you take just like the Terrorgeist or Zombie Dragon alone as opposed to, with the dude on top? Because they do get a lot cheaper when you've just got the monster and you're not chewing a leader slot as well. How often do you have the guy on top versus just rolling out a Terrorgeist or a Zombie Dragon?
I'd say relatively 50-50. Most of the time I do not have a behemoth slot filled without the leader on top of it. But then at the same time, sometimes I do. There's a Royal Menagerie battalion where you can run, I think 3 or more is the requirement of behemoths. And in that case, I don't run the leaders on top of them. But
you
usually, yeah, you
like
can.
that,
and,
yeah, they changed that.
yeah, and I usually run 4 in that army. 3 of them are in that battalion. The 4th one is usually a character mounted on either a Terrorgeist or a Zombie Dragon. But a lot of people say don't take the behemoth. If you're going to take the behemoth, you might as well take the HQ or the leader on top of it. But I'd say just play around with whatever is comfortable to you, because it's not like the Ghoul King really makes up that massive of a difference that it's just like, oh, you should never take a behemoth. You should always take the Ghoul King. There's times where just a Terrorgeist and just a Zombie Dragon performs well. But at the same time, a behemoth without a leader on top of it, they're not entirely too tough to kill. I think they're 14 wounds with a 4-up armor save. And if you hit it with enough attacks, it'll go away. And without the king on top of it, it no longer has the regenerative ability.
Right.
Except for the Terrorgeist, but they have to be within a certain amount of inches of another Terrorgeist or another hero, I do believe. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's interesting because the cost savings aren't insignificant, right? Like it's 100 or 140 points depending on which comparison you're making, right? And that's certainly not nothing. I haven't built out enough sort of versions of the army, because what makes me wonder is, like, is there a world where I get 4 instead of 3 or 3 instead of 2 or something like that, where it becomes where the math works out? You know what I'm saying? Like, because effectively, like, you'd like 2 of those guys, you shave that off. That's basically a third one for free, as it were. Right. So, like, is there a world where that's the math that makes sense given the other units and what's in there? I don't know. I love the hashtag, 3 mag meta, triple mag meta. But yeah, so I'm always a fan of, like, overloading giant monsters that people don't see coming. Because 1 is easy to deal with, as you mentioned. You just focus on it, it goes down. 2 becomes tougher. 3 often becomes something that most people can't deal with before they hit the lines. And so when I look at that, there's sort of a critical tipping point about 3 big giant monsters.
Yep.
That becomes like the enemy can't respond fast enough to bring them down before they're in. And especially with a flying monster like this, that's pretty destructive. So it just, the points work out very differently. You can crack on for, roughly 1,000 versus 880 and end up at 3 versus 2. Maybe that's worth it. Maybe it's not. I haven't run the full numbers on it, but it's an interesting comparison. I think for my pick for just sort of the other unit stuff, I agree with you. The Crypt Flayers are the ones, like, for my money, these guys are fantastic.
Absolutely.
Between the 12-inch move, the fact they got fly, the fact that they can trigger mortal wounds, they have a ranged attack it's not great, but it can synergize well with the bravery knock. Like, to me, they are the star of the army. Which I also love, because they were a unit that didn't exist, that just got created out of a different way to build the models here. So it's awesome.
Even the fluff for them is, strangely enough, the Crypt Flayers, in the terms of how the army operates, they in themselves in the lore view themselves as like skirmishers and knights that ride ahead of everybody else, and they scout the lines and stuff like that. And it's like, how do you delusion yourself like riding a horse or scouting when you have these huge wings growing out of you?
They're very
the wind. It's the wind flowing across your skin. I was gonna say hair, but they've lost that a long time ago.
Yeah.
They're just very crazy.
Yeah, no, there's actually a really interesting part of the Battle Tome where there's a scene where they just got done fighting a band of ogres, and as the fluff goes, is when the Flesh Eater courts kind of move away from the other Flesh Eater courts' lower ranks, they tend to go more delusional, and they, well, in a bad way, their delusion that's keeping them in the mindset that they're knights starts to fade, and they start to revert back to that bestial kind of ghoul form.
Ah.
And there's a section in the book where there's two ghouls eating a ogre, and there's no nobles around to keep that mindset over into their knights, and they're sitting there pushing each other and fighting and scrambling to get guts. And then suddenly one of them looks up, and you see this golden, majestic king on a beautiful dragon come rolling in clad in golden armor. And then the ghoul looks down to his brother ghoul, and suddenly they're footmen, and they're just like, why are we fighting? Why don't we share the loot, brother? And they're holding, like, you know, coin pouches in their hands, and like, absolutely, I don't see why we can't, share the loot. And I was like,
awesome.
that's so insane. That there's even artwork that shows a bone club stuck in a corpse in the book, and in the shadow, it's actually a real knight sword. And I was like, that's actually really cool.
That's fantastic. I love that. Well, I mean, overall, I think they're an interesting army. I hope if we get some general death updates, or as these releases, that we do see them get a touch, because I think they're very compelling, and I think they have a neat story. They have some really unique fluff. Mm-hmm. They stand apart from the rest of Death,
which takes a lot to make them feel different.
Yeah. Death has a uniformity of feeling problem right now, right? Because so much of it does feel like it's just under Nagash's sort of thing. And these guys they stand aside. So I'd love to see them get some more love. So there we go. All right. Well, Cody, thank you very much, sir. Pleasure having you on today. Really appreciated it.
Thank you for having me, sir.
Absolutely. We'd love to have you back anytime, especially as you start getting through those new armies. We'll have to have you back, and we'll talk about your experiences with those forces.
Absolutely.
For all of you out there, like I said, Venomous Wargaming is linked below. Go give the channel a sub. It's a great channel if you want to see some AOS battle reports with, as we mentioned, Flesh Eaters or some other great armies from his regular opponents. And for everybody out there, don't forget, get your voting in. Link is down below. Go vote. Vote now. Do it. 3, 2, 1. Do it. All right. Thank you very much. As always, we appreciate you watching. Remember, I'm Vince, and I'll see you next Wednesday.